this is update for November 8, 2022, day 258 of the war and of the date update. So as always, we're gonna start with sort of general topics, and then we're gonna do walks through the front line. So let's actually look at the first news, and as we always, we recently been focused on China because this is where the I would say center of attention, or where the gravity of this whole situation is shifting to. So as you can see, this is Chinese President Xi Jinping visiting some military, headquarters, the command center, and he was very clear that the army needs to be prepared for the war. So as you can see, he is, I would say, he's clearly sending a signal that things are changing, even in its subconscious level, that things are shifting to the military sort of situation. You usually would see him in, like business suit, very nicely dressed. He's always taking care of himself. He's not someone who is, let's say, the like leader of North Korea. He's, has very polished Western look. He really understands when he move. This is very clear gesture, right? That's what I'm trying to say, is that he's sending to the world and to China, first of all, to Chinese military, to Chinese society, right? So that's a message he's sending. In addition to this, Chinese military showed a new anti-ship hypersonic missile, and this is directly, directed at the U.S. Because the way U.S. may engage or may not, well, it's always everything super speculative in this potential war, is using aircraft carriers, right? So these missiles are basically aircraft carrier killers. So that's their main goal, and that's how the Chinese military will provide cover for its invading forces from the US, from the attacks from the US forces, right? Because US will be attacking from the ships, right? That's the only real way for US there. And so essentially, this is going to be umbrella for the invading forces. So it was clear signal to the US, uh, you know, back off, or you're gonna get hurt. Um, I'm not gonna mention the Taiwanese president who was saying like it might be imminent and so on. As I mentioned yesterday, I don't think it's imminent based on other indicators, but you never know at the same time. It does look. I would still, if I have to bet, and it's obviously speculative, I would bet for some time in the spring. Could be that things will accelerate because, as I mentioned before, situation inside of China economically deteriorating significantly, and to control the population, they have the zero COVID policy to control, but eventually there is always limit for everything, and they will have to sort of pull the trigger essentially, because they won't be able to control anymore. So that's the situation in China, as it's on the path for you know um, to get more and more dangerous. Let's put this way. Then let's switch a little bit to Russia. So there is a news that I mentioned this many times before, that Russia sells its crude oil and coal to Turkey, India. Main buyers are India and China. So there is actually now start to develop the problem with India as a buyer of the Russian coal, and it's actually economic problem. It has nothing to do with sanctions. Sanctions don't work. They never worked, and they never will. However, what really works is monetary tightening or increase in interest rates that Federal Reserve is doing in the US, and it really creates difficult situation, at least in the coal space. So Russia has to sell coal to India at 70% discount. That's really huge. So as a result, they're actually losing money on every single metric ton of coal that they are shipping to India, because as you can imagine, the distance to India is huge. So you also have need to pay for this, freight rate, which is also big. So essentially, you have nothing left there as a profit, and actually, Russia is losing money. So what is clear out of all of this is that sale of coal is essentially dead. Russia may still sell some coal to China, but there is also a problem even there. So basically, Russia is, European or like even Urals, or let's say, call it like Western Siberia. It's kind of connected to the Russian Far East by essentially two railroads. One is called Trans-Siberian Railroad, uh, and the other one is called Baikal Amur Railroad. It's for short. It's called BAM. So those are two roads, and if you cut them, essentially the country is cut into half. There is no connection. There is nothing. So when Russia tried to actually increase exports of coal to China recently, there is basically created huge bottleneck on railroads, and it's simply there's not enough even close capacity. So to increase export of coal to China, so essentially it's all bottlenecked, and Russia cannot really increase, as I said, export of coal to China. Similar situation with the natural gas. There is pipeline, but it's again, capacity is not even close to what Russia is losing in Europe. So Russian energy exports are significantly bottlenecked in terms of being able to send them to China. Obviously both sides are working on fixing it, but it's not going to be a quick fix. It takes years to build pipeline or, lay new tracks. So maybe at least it's definitely not a matter of a month, 2 months, 6 months. It's a matter of maybe like 2 years. Let's put it this way. If everything is done quick, maybe a year and a half. Giving that China is much faster and everything. Russia is absolutely bureaucratic, but Chinese side can do sort of move quick. So what this really means is that Russia cannot really redirect all of this sort of coal and natural gas export to China to sufficient amount to offset losses in Europe, and losses in Europe are gonna start to hurt more and more, especially after December 5, and then even more so into the new year. So it's gonna get really painful. At the same time, Russian budget is completely out of balance. I mentioned this before. Russian state finances were in extremely pristine order and condition before the war and at the beginning of the war, like that no Western country is coming even close to how well Russian state finances were managed. Now things completely deteriorated, and it's everything is upside down. There are huge deficits. They're growing. There are even problems with paying money to the conscripts. So sometimes they go public and complain that they're not getting paid. So things are really deteriorating. Started to deteriorate inside Russia, and economically, financially. It's not sort of it's not like like everything's gonna be bad tomorrow or in a month, but it starts to be the problems start to gain momentum, and it's going to be exponential rise, right? So as time passes, the problems will magnify much faster than what we've seen so far. But it's not a question of a month. It's probably a question of 2, 3, 4, 5 months as time horizon there. So that's a situation with Russia. Now let's switch to European, well, I guess to Ukraine and European Union. So European Union announced that it will not give promised 3 billion euros to Ukraine out of the 9 that were promised. So as you can see, the problems, that not only Russia suffering from problems, the same, European Union suffers mightily as well, right? So that's probably the reason for sort of how to say, withdrawing that promised aid. um, and it is what it is. It's Ukraine in the end. It's Ukraine's leadership, it's Ukraine society fault that it's not prepared and it's not doing right things to be self-sustainable, which is, I've been talking about this pretty much since March, that without being self-sustainable, Ukraine has no future and has no ability to self-defend. Unfortunately, the current leadership is um, absolutely incompetent of how to be self-sustainable, or I would say corrupt. It's actually that it goes hand in hand, incompetent and then corrupt. And so all they see as a solution is how to, you know, um, ask for more from someone else, basically. And that always ends, right? And by the way, speaking about that always ends, today there were elections in the U.S. Looks like Republican Party is winning in significant way, as sort of predicted. No surprises there. So remains to be seen if support of Ukraine remains there, because as I mentioned before, there are two sort of, I would say, two parts to the Republican Party. One is completely opposing support, and the other one recognizes that support is needed, and it's actually in the best interest of the U.S. Yes, there is a question about, you know who money, well, I would say money are giving in Ukraine to, because those people are extremely corrupt. But at the same time, it's, in a way, US is itself in somewhat desperate situation in this situation in general. Um, so remains to be seen. Does look that the support will remain. Maybe it's going to be, you know, less, or there will be more requirements about the control of the how money spent, which would be actually a great idea. Is have control, because otherwise this is a black hole. Ukrainian budget or Ukrainian government is literally a black hole where the money disappear and then they appear on accounts in the Swiss banks. So that's the situation. And so as you can see that economic difficulties pushing Europe to cut its support. By the way, I think there were announcements from the UK that it's going to cut support as well, because UK is in a very difficult financial situation, um, where it's it's on the edge in terms of some of the pension funds could be insolvent there, and that's gonna can create sort of really ripple effects throughout the entire society, economy, and really create huge problems. So UK government is trying to sort of cut the expenses where they can. And that's totally understandable. There's that they need to save their own country first, and that's very logical. So that's and then actually forgot to mention about China, that this kind of like a negative negative situation between China and Europe also start to sort of grow. So the head of, I think, European Commission, it's called, or European Council, Charles Michel, was supposed to, well, he recorded the speech for the expo in China, trade expo in China, where he was basically criticizing Russia's war against Ukraine and was calling sort of on China not to sort of support Russia and all of that. So that videotape was removed, censored, and was not presented at that expo. So as you can see, this is very, the tensions are rising at sort of at every single sort of angle, no matter where you look. The things are getting sort of more intense and go in a negative direction. Then let's actually finish with Iran. So there was sort of kind of like slow motion uprising, or it's kind of like a revolution or whatever it was going on there, and it looks like that movement, or whatever we're gonna call it, is actually gonna turn into civil war in Iran. And the reason for that is that Iranian parliament basically called on the death penalty for all of the protesters who are already in the prisons, and there are at least 14,000 of those. So basically, they're just telling to them, I forgot the name of it, this um, Iranian, whatever, Islamic Revolution Guards or whatever they called. Basically, they're kind of like um, internal army to control the rest of the population. So they were calling on them to execute essentially all of the protesters who already were caught and in the prisons. And that's 14,000 people. So that's a very clear indication that country is heading into the civil war. What's going to happen, how it's going to come out of it is totally unknown. One sort of potential prediction that it may lose significant territories that are populated by Azerbaijani. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but there's a country called Azerbaijan, which was part of the Soviet Union. Uh, and so significant portions of the Iran populated by this Azerbaijan ethnic population. And there is high probability that as a result of that, Iran may lose those territories and they will go to Azerbaijan, which will increase its position as a regional power there. And just for those people who don't know much, essentially Azerbaijan and Turkish people, it's kind of like almost the same. Uh, Basically, they view themselves as a part of sort of one ethnic group essentially. So Turkey will definitely will try to help Azerbaijan in that way. So there could be some other tensions there as well. So as you can see, the tensions are rising pretty much everywhere you look, and yeah, the situation is extremely explosive around the world. I'm not even mentioning where the Brazil is going to go there after elections, because you can see there is a clear sort of division of the country into even two halves, which also can go down as some sort of civil war there as well. But I'm not expert on Brazil, so but not gonna say. But it just doesn't look good there either. So now let's actually talk a little bit about Ukraine. So the energy distribution infrastructure is still functioning. It's still providing electricity. As I mentioned before, there are sort of uncontrolled blackouts. So most of the population does not have electricity for at least 8 hours. Some don't have for 9, 10 hours. So situation for now is stable, but this is obviously will depend more on the, on the winter temperatures and so on, and what Russia plans to do essentially. But so far they stopped those attacks right before sort of like final blow. Remains to be seen what happens next. Now let's actually move to the oh, and then one more important note. I mentioned this a few videos before, but Russia received kamikaze drones from Iran, and it's been using them extremely successfully. They're definitely creating a lot of damage, and actually high quality damage. Like, so there were videos today of those drones, and I don't know the names of those. Unfortunately, not disclosed. But they destroyed, this Polish crab, which is excellent self-propelled howitzer. So basically, they targeting sort of high-value military assets, and they being successful in destroying them. And this is not just one sort of unit that's being destroyed. There are several, and a few days ago there was quite a bit as well. So if this continues, it will cumulatively really well, I wouldn't say right now that it will destroy the advantage that Ukrainian army has right now in terms of artillery, especially long range precision artillery, but it will significantly diminish Ukrainians army sort of attacking potential. The HIMARS rocket systems are essentially unreachable for the Russian side. They just too maneuverable, so there is no way they can get them. So far they haven't destroyed a single one, and probably they will not be able to do so, given what the equipment they have. But unfortunately, those self-propelled howitzers are being lost to this Iranian kamikaze drone. So again, I want to contrast this with Switchblade 600, which didn't turn out to be effective at all, and looks like it's a big, let's say, flop and big boondoggle that where there a lot of money spent for nothing. Versus, if you look at this Iranian drones, they are cheap, or let's say dirty cheap, assembled from whatever commercial grade electronic equipment Iran can buy, uh, and they destroying expensive high value targets, and pretty successfully. So that's as a strategy, it's extremely successful. Now let's actually switch to the front line. Situation along the state border is pretty quiet. No major exchange of the artillery fire there. Now let's move to North Luhansk front line. Things here are somewhat similar. Ukrainian troops trying to attack, but they cannot really penetrate Russian defenses. As you can see, they are tracking along this road that goes from Kupiansk to Svatove. Again, no success here. Then no success in this area where they want to just cut the Russian defenses into two halves, and there's no success where the Ukrainian troops trying to attack straight towards Crimea. So again, as I mentioned before many times, the opportunity has been lost probably like months and a half ago, unfortunately. Now let's move to North Donbass front line, where mostly Wagner mercenaries are operating here. So they again attacking in more or less the same places, Soledar. So there are unconfirmed information from the Russian sources that they completely captured Bakhmutske, this small village, kind of like suburb of Soledar. So this is uh, based on this unconfirmed information, which I wouldn't be surprised it turns out true, that they fully control Bakhmutsk at this point. And then they are making, then as you can see, south of Bakhmut, there are reports that they are basically making progress and capturing this kind of like, all of these fields here. But unfortunately, there's no way to confirm where they are. But basically, there's very big chance that there is another salient similar to this that kind of like is directed, approaching Klishivka, and sort of Ukrainian sort of defense still, the Ukrainian forces still hold open there, but then it kind of goes like this in the Dradivka. So again, as mentioned before, they don't have sort of success for a while. I'm meaning Wagner mercenaries, and then eventually they slowly but surely chip away from Ukrainian defenses here, and the Ukrainian forces are not able to successfully counterattack against Wagner mercenaries because, as I mentioned before, um, this unit or this organization is built on common sense and essentially absence of any bureaucracy, no red tape. And Ukrainian army is completely opposite of that. And it's, as I said, it's a Soviet army with a lot of red tape, disempowering people, soldiers on the ground. So as a result, you cannot compete uh, against such force essentially. And so this is a strategic problem basically. If all of the Russian army was like that, uh, there's a big question that Ukrainian troops will be able to hold the defensive line overall. Now let's move to central Donbass front line. Things here are more or less the same as always. Attacks out of this salient north of Avdiivka, then Piski here salient, then unsuccessful attacks in Marinka, and uh, this bogged down attempt that's essentially looks like it's over at this point to capture Vuhledar. So Russian troops captured part of the Pavlivka, but paid very heavy, extremely heavy price for that result. And it's not worth it. As I said before, Pavlivka is essentially you cannot control it. It's kind of like coming in a package with Vuhledar. You need to have both. If you don't have Vuhledar, then essentially Pavlivka turns into trap, and it's like a death volley that you essentially want to withdraw from because you're just going to be slowly but surely eliminated there. Now let's quickly check Zaporizhya front line. Things here are quiet as always, nothing new here. And let's now finally move to Kherson bridgehead. So there are actually developments here. So Ukrainian troops attacked in 3 areas simultaneously. So I'll start with first one is here, this highway that goes from Mykolaiv to Kherson. So first attack is here, which was completely unsuccessful. The second attack was north of Snigurivka, and it actually was successful. So there are reports that Ukrainian troops completely liberated Snigurivka and fully controlling Snigurivka. What Russian sources say is that definitely Ukrainian troops controlling northern part of Snigurivka, essentially. So we'll find out more as things develop, but there's clearly a penetration of the Russian defensive line there. And then the third attack, which is close to this to Dnipro River here, where as well Ukrainian troops penetrated first defensive line, Russian defensive line, but it's unclear if they were able to sort of continue their success or just initial small crack and they got stuck and eventually they will be attacked by Russian artillery. Even though at this point Russian artillery here is feeling what is called shell hunger. So they rationing, and I'm not saying that they don't have shells, but it's not what Russian artillery used to be, like where they just they don't even think about shells. They just can do, they can shoot as much as they want. Here they really need to think twice. And that gives a chance that this crack eventually going to be expanded into something bigger. So I'll provide more information tomorrow as sort of this situation develops. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.